healthy drive, or frustrating failure. You can't be perfect. You know that. But does that stop you from striving for perfect? And that very desire for perfect, is that a driving force for success? Or a major obstacle, self-created? Are there certain things that you'd like to do perfectly, but not worry about the rest? Or do you just really not care at all, and anything goes? Well, lucky you. My personality type is extroverted, which I love the outer world, sensing, love the details, feeling, make decisions with my emotions, and perceiving, very flexible with the way I see the world. And I'm a relaxed type, and not much bothers me. If things are neat and tidy, and I know what expectations I have of myself and others, I'm not too stressed about things being perfect. My favourite saying when I was studying at uni was, well, P's get degrees. And I was right. I got one. Now, the Myers-Briggs type indicator doesn't measure perfectionism, as it primarily focuses on understanding personality preferences and tendencies. However, certain MBTI types may exhibit traits or behaviours that could be associated with perfectionism. Let's look at two types today that are often associated with perfectionistic tendencies. The first is the ISTJ, introverted, sensing, thinking, and judging. The second is the INTJ, introverted, intuitive, thinking, and judging. Now, ISTJs are known for their attention to detail and have strong organisational skills. They have a preference for following established rules and procedures, which can contribute to their desire for perfection in their work and tasks. They typically strive for accuracy and efficiency, seeking to complete tasks to the best of their abilities. Now, INTJs, on the other hand, are characterized by their strategic thinking and long-term planning. They often have very high standards for themselves and others, seeking excellence in their endeavours. INTJs may exhibit perfectionist tendencies in their pursuit of precision and the mastery of complex concepts or projects. Now, it's important to note that not all individuals within a particular MBTI type will exhibit perfectionism, as personality traits can vary amongst individuals of the same type. Additionally, other MBTI types might also display perfectionist tendencies based on their individual traits, values, and experiences. Perfectionism can be influenced by many factors, such as upbringing, personal values, environmental influences, which extend beyond personality type. The term perfectionism refers to a specific mindset and behavioural pattern that goes beyond simply pursuing excellence. These are attention to detail, fear of failure, procrastination, self-criticism, need for control, black and white thinking, overemphasis on external validation, and impaired well-being. You may have some of these mindsets and behaviours, but not fall under the umbrella of the term perfectionist. I'm Kate Mason, and welcome to Parenting and Personalities. This is the podcast that connects you to the ones you care about the most. Today I'm talking to Megan Gallagher. Megan is an extraordinary teacher and presenter. She's also a business owner of Ignite Your Spark, providing consultant and coaching services. She also co-hosts a teacher's podcast called Teachers Matter, where she and her co-host Karen Tui Boys provide support and help to the teaching community worldwide. Her goal in life is to help people thrive so that our children, families, schools, workplaces, communities, and the world can be happier and healthier. Now, I'm talking to Meg Gallagher today, and Meg and I have talked about the attachment theory and the importance of early brain development in our previous podcast, so take a listen to that if you want to after this one. And today we're discussing perfectionism, but don't expect a perfect podcast because that's not going to happen. Good morning, Meg. How are you?
Good morning, Kate. What a wonderful way to segue into the whole conversation. I love it.
You're talking to a non-perfectionist, so it's quite easy for me. So look, I'm just wondering, what does a dire desire for perfection do to your psyche when you're under pressure? So when people are perfectionists, what does it do to them?
Well, it's a funny thing because perfectionists are driving for perfect, right?
Yes.
They want everything to be perfect.
Yep.
But actually, when they're under pressure and when things aren't going well, their drive for perfection actually increases their stress and reduces their productivity. And they end up not doing as well as they could if they had let go of that perfect picture that they've got. It completely, when you're in that real perfectionist dip or zone, it completely distracts you from your mission and your purpose, the underlying mission and purpose of life. It's driven by fear, by this constant feeling of being not good enough or letting people down, or what will people say, or that you're deficient in some way. And so we can't thrive and we can't be joyful and we really can't experience the richness of life if we're stuck in that perfectionist zone.
So are you obviously have had some area of thought around perfectionism yourself. Are you a total perfectionist? So people that are perfectionists that actually kind of, it's not good for their life. I mean, it's not bad to be a perfectionist in certain areas. Do you feel that you're a perfectionist in certain areas and you can let go in others?
Yeah, so I'm actually probably more of a high achiever than a perfectionist.
And what's the difference there?
The difference I see that is the differences between, really wanting to do a good job and almost like that. There's actually a quote from Dr. Strange, where she talks about, he was great because he always achieves, not because he craves success, but because he fears failure. And I think that's the difference between perfectionist and a high achiever. A high achiever really wants to do well. A perfectionist wants to do well because they're scared to death that they're going to fail. And that failure is driving them. At times, I have tended towards that perfectionist thing, and I know when I'm in that zone because I see a whole lot of kind of crappy behaviours come up. So really negative self-talk. Procrastination is my favourite go-to when I'm in a perfectionist bubble. I tend to overwork or overcompensate in some area to try and cover up what I believe is an inadequacy in another area. And it's when I've got these unrealistic high expectations, I say yes to everything and then I can't do it.
So what changed you? How did you work out that those behaviours were actually really bad and really affecting you, and obviously they affect your life and the people that you live with when you're like that? So how did you recognise it yourself, and what rules do you put around yourself? So, not rules necessarily, but things around yourself so that you don't fall into that hole.
Yeah, so one of the biggest thing was about being really aware when I was using comparison. So I used to suffer quite badly from comparatitis. I don't think it's actually a real disease, but it certainly is one of the mind, I believe, where I'd be looking at other people and going, yeah, but I don't do it as well as them. I'm not as good as them. I'll never be as good as them. If I can't do it perfectly like them, then I'm not going to try because I'll just fail. And why would I put myself in that position? And so what I did was I deliberately started putting myself in positions where I wasn't feeling 100% comfortable, and learned to celebrate other people's success and not seeing that as diminishing my own, or diminishing who I am. And in fact, that's completely changed my relationships. And that's something that happened quite a number of years ago. So I started being aware of that. And that was quite helpful. So that was the being aware of what was happening with others, and my relationship with them and with this perfectionism. And then as I've got older, I've done the work inside. So I hear my thoughts now. I see my behaviours pop up. Like last year was a perfect example. I was doing Chicago for a local theatrical society. And I have no idea to this day why they put me in the dance troupe. No idea, because I am not a dancer, right? It's not something my body would love to do, but it's not something it naturally is comfortable doing. And and the year before I'd broken my ankle as well, so I still had an injury that I was healing from. But they put me in the dance troupe, and I'm in this dance troupe with women and girls who are 20 and 30 years younger than me, who have trained in dancing.
Oh.
And then I missed the first 2 weeks of rehearsal from COVID. And I'm like, good Lord, it was just a perfect storm for a recovering perfectionist to be put into. And, like I went to my first rehearsal, completely screwed it up, felt utterly inadequate, went home crying. And I nearly rang and said, look, I can't do this. Take me out of the show. And it was in that moment I went, okay, that's a red flag for me. Why am I saying I can't do it? Where's that come from? And man, it was hard work. It was excessively hard work for me because I didn't want to let anyone else down on that show. I have a big philosophy around theatre, being that our job on stage is to make everyone look good, and we do that by making sure we do our part well. So I was really, really driven to make sure I did my bit well. And that meant that I asked my choreographer for extra help.
Right.
And I had to be brave and ask for extra help. I asked the other girls who were trained dancers for help. And that was brave because that's not my natural inclination. I'm the helper, not the helpee. And that was 20 years ago, I wouldn't have done that. 20 years ago, I would have said, no, I can't do it. I'll hand out programs at the front,
Yes,
let me do the bar. I'll do something backstage. So that was a really good example.
How did you go? How did you look?
I did fine. Apparently I looked like everybody else.
That's amazing.
In the dance troops.
So sometimes it is about breaking it down. And you know what? The thing is that people often don't like asking for help.
No.
But most people love to help someone. They love to help someone. Like you say, you're the helper. You don't really like to ask for help. But asking for help is amazing. And then when people help you, that just builds another bond around the fact that you're a bit vulnerable. Then they don't look at you as, oh my God, look at her, she's trying really hard, she's no good at this. They, when you come to them and go, help me, people do love to do that.
Exactly. And the other thing is, and this took me a long time to realise, is that I when I help people, I feel good. So by not asking people to help me, I'm denying them the opportunity to feel good and valued and useful. And that's a terrible thing to do. So, go ask somebody for help.
Yeah, because you're going to be making them feel fantastic. And make sure that's good. Yep. No, because it is true. It is really true. And I'm the same as you. I love it when someone asks for help, but then I do actually ask people for help too, particularly my kids, and they really don't want to, and particularly around the internet and stuff like that, which I'm useless at. But, they're obviously, they don't care whether they feel good or not. Now, my struggle is, I really don't understand perfectionism in that I will let things go. And if I look at something and it's all going to be too hard, part of my personality type is I just go, well, I'm better off not doing it. I don't really want to get that stressed about it. I let people know in advance. It wouldn't be like I'd let a big thing go. But if it's putting too much pressure on me, I can flick things aside. So I can go, no, I'm going to let that go till tomorrow. That can last another week. So I push things out. Now, I run workshops with personality type, and there are certain people in those workshops that sit there and they have their lists and their planner and their whole things, and they're really stressed. And I say to them, can you let anything go? Why don't you just restructure your list, put the most important things at the top? And they all say to me, I can't. It's more stressful to let go than it is to hang on to it and try and get it all done. Do you understand that? Yeah. So what would you say to those people? Because I struggle. I sit there and think, I don't know what to say to you guys because I'm not even on that boat, too bad, my goodness. So what would be a great answer for me to help them with?
Well, that's a really tough one because if what you've done for a long time is you've defined yourself by being the person that gets things done, then we're actually, by saying that, let it go, you're actually asking them to lose a piece of themselves or how they've defined themselves. So I think it's actually going back another few steps and going, okay, so why do you need to get everything done? Where does that come from? And then asking them what would happen if you don't get everything done. And asking them to think about who else works like this around you. Who else is doing everything, or is it just you? And is that fair and equitable? And so it's almost appealing to that logical controlling part, which is, what we try to, as perfectionists, we try to, manage everything and control everything and give everything a reason and a purpose. It helps to just sort of unpack that a little bit and go back. And then when you start to realize that actually if you didn't do this, or if you asked somebody else to do this, that would be okay. And another thing is saying, a lot of perfectionists really struggle with letting somebody else do it because they won't do it as well. They won't do it right in the correct way. Is going, let's get really, really clear on what the purpose and goal of this is. Does it matter how it's done? Or does it matter that we get that end result, or we get on that way? What's the most important thing here? And if the most important thing for this particular item is how it's done, then you need to communicate that to the person that's going to do it. If it doesn't matter, you're just looking for the outcome, then you communicate the outcome to that person, and then you have to step back, and it's going to hurt. It's actually physically going to hurt you to watch somebody do something.
It is. It would.
What you perceive to be the wrong way. But the more that you do it, it's like when my son was very little, he was wanting to carry his own toast on his plate from the kitchen to the living room or dining room, and it would fall off the plate. And I was getting a bit hacked off with that because the dog thought it was great.
Dog's putting on kilos.
Yeah, he was having a great time, but it was a bit frustrating for me. And one of my colleagues, actually an older granddad, said, give him some blocks on a plate and help him to practice. I thought, all right.
Great idea.
So we put 4 wee blocks on the plate, and we said, okay, we're going to pretend this is toast, and we're going to practice so that we can get it to the table without the dog getting it. Let's see how we go. And then we practiced and we practiced and we practiced, and he could do it. Now, that was about me having to let go of my perfection, which would have said, oh, God, just let me take the plate to the table, because it was going to be so much easier and faster. But letting go of that and being able to do, and look, honestly, we need to do that with our colleagues as well, because as perfectionists and or control freaks, which we sometimes seem to be, we actually, again, take the learning away from other people by trying to do it all ourselves. And we deny them the chance to learn through their mistakes. And so we're actually impeding other people's growth and development by doing it ourselves. So that's another way to appeal to that perfectionist side, is if you want to grow your people, you've got to let go of some of the stuff.
Hey, parenting's a tough gig. There are no rule books, just you and any well-meant advice, books that don't always hit the mark, and, well, maybe your well-meaning mother-in-law telling you what to do. No one knows your kid or you. Contact me and we'll find out how you can connect to your most important treasure. thepersonalitycoach.com.au. That's really wise, wonderful advice. If anyone needs any help with overcoming perfectionism, talk to Meg. Check out her details. Don't come to me because I'm not going to be any good for you. But that's wonderful, really getting back to the why, and what purpose does it have and how can you fix it. That's great advice for me. Thank you very much. That's wonderful. So if you have a child, there's a certain genetic thing in perfectionism, because to have a child that is a perfectionist from the very start. And I know that my son is much more of a perfectionist than I am. And I went to a psychologist at one time because he was concerned about his Xbox that he had at the time. And he used to worry about it getting damaged or anything happening to it. And the psychologist said to me, ask him what's the worst thing that could happen. So I went back and I said, what's the worst thing that happened? He said, look, I'd lose all my games that I've got up to certain levels on. I'd have to start all over again. So with my fingers crossed like this, I sat there and said, I'll pay for someone to put all those games back on for you. I'll buy you a new Xbox. And do you know what? That really did satisfy his need. I went to the reason, and the reason was all of those games. And when I told him, it would cost me so much money. Thank goodness nothing ever happened to it. But when I told him that I would solve those problems, he was so much more relaxed. And he tells me years later that that was the best thing that I did for him. So if he's lucky because he hasn't got perfectionist parents. I think had he had perfectionist parents, he might be far more of a person that wanted to get things right, but he's got parents who really don't care. So how do you recognize a perfectionist child to start with?
So, like in the, as a teacher, we see a lot of this actually in classrooms, and probably, again, more so now than what we did 30, 40 years ago. But often they will be master avoiders of doing anything that they think they might get wrong. They struggle to initiate tasks. So, for writing, they'll be sitting there going, oh, but I haven't got all my ideas sorted, so I can't write.
Right.
It won't be perfect. They stress over getting things right. They may have quite emotional outbursts if they do get something wrong. They're anxious about making mistakes, so they might come and continually check in with you. Constantly looking for affirmation. Is this right? Am I done? Is this good enough? Obsessed by small mistakes. So, like one classic example I've seen with a few children actually, with writing, when they're just writing a story and they start writing and they misspell a word, they can't leave the misspelt word. They have to rub it out and fix it right now. And then by the time they've done that, they've forgotten their flow and they've got out of
Yes.
And then they become frustrated because they can't get it right.
And stressed,
Yeah, and so it increases their stress, and then it makes it harder for them to write. So lots of these kids don't write very much because it's just too hard to get it all perfect. And so, there's those sorts of cues and clues. They might have absolutely beautiful handwriting. It might take them an exceptionally long time to do their handwriting, their writing, their artwork, to even follow an instruction, because they're just so obsessed with trying to get it right. And they may come back. Other things with others is they might be very controlling with others in group work. They might be obsessed with correcting their teacher and looking for the holes in what you're doing.
Right.
Not always, and this can be other tendencies too, but for perfectionists sometimes that is. If you haven't, put the things up on the board the right way, they'll correct you on that and want that to be done. So that's around that controlling that environment so that it feels safe and secure. And so those are some of the cues that I'd be looking for.
Wow. So if you have those, if you're a teacher, what do you address that with a parent, or do you just kind of notice it? Because maybe parents don't know and address. They think, I've got this great kid who wants to do everything right, and that can be a wonderful child to have but if it is perfectionism, then what's something you might say to a parent that might help them?
So with parents, I would share, look, if I notice these sorts of behaviours, it makes me feel like they're actually held back from being able to truly express themselves by being able to make the progress they could academically and socially or emotionally, whatever's happening in school, depending on what the situation is and where the perfectionism is showing itself and how it's exhibiting. But generally it does hold them back. So I'd come from that academic perspective and say, look, it's holding them back from their learning because they're not able to make the mistakes that we need to make in order to learn. Because our brain is an adaptive organ. What it does is it adapts to the environment and what's happening in the environment constantly. And if we are perfectionists, we're actually avoiding the mistakes that helps us to adapt more quickly and more competently to be able to make these connections. So we want them to make mistakes. So that's how I'd communicate that with parents. And then with parents, one of the biggest pieces of advice is to help our children to focus on the process, not the product.
Right.
So Carol Dweck did a lot of work a few years ago around growth mindset, and it's become a bit of a thing. But really at the heart of it, it's really about let's focus on the process. What am I learning right now? And to celebrate the small steps, to recognise where we need help, to embrace our mistakes as valuable learning opportunities, not a signature of or a sign of our failure or inadequacy. And so if we as parents and as teachers focus in on that process, we can praise the product. That's not a problem. And if somebody wins, yay, celebrate that. We should celebrate those things as well, but celebrate the steps on the way. And recognise that actually one of the things might be, hey, I noticed like the other day I was doing we were making boats out of cardboard to see if they'd float, and I had some weights that we were putting on them to see if they'd float with weight on them. And we were exploring density. It was fantastic. And I actually had a student who is a bit of a perfectionist who actually said out loud, I've tested it and it failed. So I'm coming back and now I'm taping this bit up because I think that's where it failed. And I was like, yay. And we celebrated that moment because that moment was huge for him. He recognised that he had made a mistake and he was using it to go and do something different. And I was like, yay, I love it. So that's really important. And one of the most important things as parents, because we are such an important part of our children's lives or caregivers, is to demonstrate this, because we are the best teachers for our kids because they're watching us all the time. So if we sit there and we're constantly criticising ourselves, our child will hear that and believe that that's how we're supposed to operate. And so they'll start criticising themselves. This goes, mothers talking about their weight in particular, not mothers, well, more often mothers than
yes,
fathers.
Yes, it is. Look, it does tend to.
Where we sit there and we look in the mirror and we go, oh, God, I feel so fat. Or when we sit in the car and we've made a mistake and we go, oh, I'm so stupid. Our kids hear that, and then that becomes the voice that they choose to tune into for themselves as well. So we don't want that. So we need to think about, like people who say, oh, well, I was really dumb at maths and that's why I was no good at it. So then we're teaching the child that you either have a maths brain or not, which is a complete ridiculous thing. We don't have a maths brain. And so we want to make sure that we keep our world expansive for our kids by showing them that we can be expansive and gracious and compassionate to ourselves and to others.
And it really, I had a friend who was doing just that. She was putting herself down and her child was reflecting her language back to her. And I said to her, he's just copying you. These are things you're saying about yourself. How about telling him how wonderful you are and what a great job you do, which she did, and it did totally change it around. So I think as adults, we do put ourselves down quite a bit, verbally out loud, because we're not always aware that someone's listening as well. Those are the ears sitting there. So it is an interesting thing. I did something for Mother's Day just recently. I got my daughter to say something, and she's very funny, and she messed around and she said, well, Mum, the first thing that I might say is that you taught me how to count calories and take the bread off the top of my sandwich. And I said to her, oh my goodness, I didn't mean to do that. I felt really, she's just messing with you. But it was, obviously somewhere in her development, I've said something about calories and you don't know what stays in your child's head. So I think it is, and my children are 28 and 30. So, I just say to them, look, I've been as good a mum as I can be. I'm sure there's something like Karen and I have discussed. There'll be something they talk about to the psychologist at some time or the psychiatrist. But I tell them I have done the best job I can do. So I hope that they do that in their lives as well. That is they're wonderful stories and great takes for people who are, in that zone and feeling that way and have children with them. And I do want listeners to know that Meg runs a business and she can consult around this. She can talk to you around this. She's an amazing woman, and ready for business whenever anyone wants to chat to her. So all of her details will be at the end of the show notes. Thank you so much for being on today, Meg. It's been really wonderful to have you.
Thanks so much for the opportunity, Kate. Go well.
I hope that Meg's strategies have helped you. It's important that you seek professional support if needed. If your child's perfectionism is causing significant stress or interfering with their daily life, consider seeking professional help from a therapist or counsellor who specialises in working with children and perfectionism. Remember that change takes time, so be patient and supportive as your child learns to navigate their perfectionistic tendencies. The same goes for you as an adult. Find help if perfectionism is becoming overwhelming. and stresses you and stops you from living your very best life. Thank you for listening to Parenting and Personalities. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you could leave a rating and a review. That would help others learn about this podcast. If you're interested in discovering more about you and your family's personality types, you can find my book, Who Is This Monster or Treasure in My House, on Booktopia or Amazon. If you have an episode idea, please send a note to thepersonalitycoach@gmail.com. Many thanks to our producers at Stories and Strategies, and we'll see you next time.